Guys, and welcome back to the second video on variance analysis, and we are going to cover parts 3 and 4 in this video. So we are going to continue with the question, which is variable overhead spending variance, right? So again, heading variable overhead spending and efficiency variance. That is, I'm going to show you what that is. So first off, you're going to start with the heading variable overhead, and then you're going to write these three headings. So you have your actual, and then draw a line. You have your flexible, and then draw a line, and then you have your applied. Okay, what this means really. So variable overhead, again, you want to compare your actual to your flexible budget to your applied. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to write out the actual figure first. So my actual is, your actual is always going to be given to you, so don't worry about that. Variable overhead actual is 12,000. That is easy. Flexible. So I always want you guys to remember a formula. So there's really no escaping the formula, but if you get into the habit of doing these questions, you won't need the formula anymore. You'll understand what it means. So let me write it out first. So in order for you to find your flexible variable overhead, you can always refer back to my chapter 10 video where I discussed what a flexible budget is. So a flexible budget, what it does is it takes your standard rate or your standard, whatever you budget your standard um, rate for something to be. So in this case, our variable overhead is estimated at $5 per package, right? So we estimate that we're going to apply $5 of variable manufacturing overhead to each package that we manufacture. So what flexible does, it takes that budgeted rate and it multiplies it to you multiply it by your actual level of production in order to make your findings more accurate, right? Again, if you want to know more in depth about flexible budgets, you can always refer back to my chapter 10 video. So what you really do is you take your standard OH, variable OH rate, multiply it by your standard cost driver, multiply it by your actual units. Right, guys? So standard variable overhead rate is predetermined. It's already given to you. You may be asked to calculate it, but again, it's really simple. If you want to know more about how to calculate a predetermined overhead rate, you can refer back to my chapter 5 video where I discuss this in more detail. So your standard variable overhead rate multiplied by your standard cost driver. What is a cost driver? So a cost driver is something that makes your costs go up or down, right? You wanted that to be standard as well. So in this case there, the cost driver is the number of packages that you produce. So your packages are the same thing as your units. So in this question, there really isn't any cost driver. So you cross that out. In other questions, there may be a cost driver. There most likely will be a cost driver because the examiners want to test the hell out of you, right? So there will be that cost driver in there. So I can cover that even, but like the way that I prepared this question doesn't really have one. So what we're left with is our actual units. What really happens here is flexible. Again, you want to take your budgeted rate and your budgeted cost driver, something that makes your costs go up or down, and multiply by your actual units in order to arrive at a more accurate figure that is more consistent with the current level of activity. So in order for me to do that in this question specifically, I'm going to take my $5 and multiply it by my actual level of activity, which is 2,400 packages. So 2,400. Again, since packages equals to units, there is no cost driver. You just skipped directly. Your actual units and your standard cost driver are the same thing. So I'm going to multiply these two. That should come out to, just a second. So what am I doing? 2,400 times 5, that is 12,000. Okay then. we're not going to compare these two just yet. We're going to do applied first. So applied, the formula for applied is this. So you take your standard standard rate again. So your standard variable overhead rate, which is $5 in this case, and then you multiply it by your actual cost driver, and then multiply it by your actual units. All right, guys, so again, since we don't have a cost driver, both standard or actual, we cross this out. So your cost driver and your units are the same thing. So essentially, my answer is going to come out to be the same thing, since my standard VOH rate is $5 multiplied by my actual units, 2,400, 12,000. So all the answers are the same. So when I want to compare these two, and then I want to compare these two. So I want to compare my actual and my flexible in order to find my spending variance. So spending variance is basically comparing to what I actually spent on variable overhead compared to what I thought I would spend at that level of activity. So in this case, there is no variance. There is $0 of variance. And that really means that you planned your expenses out very well and you knew exactly what you were doing. When it comes to flexible and applied, that is your efficiency variance. And that really tests how good you are at arriving at this rate. And when you apply it based on your actual units and your actual cost driver, how consistent that is with your standard cost driver. So again, over here, you did a really good job of it. I want to get rid of this because this is getting confusing. So this shows how accurate you were in estimating and applying your variable overhead. So there is essentially no variance at all in this part of the question. We're going to move on to fixed overhead variance. That is the last part of the question. So I just want to cancel this out and put two big check marks here so that we know what we've accomplished. And finally, fixed overhead spending and efficiency variance is our final challenge. So we're going to do that over here. So heading again, fixed overhead. Now remember, guys, when we were doing direct material price and volume variance and direct labor price and volume variance, you might have felt that they were pretty much similar. Variable and fixed overhead variance are similar too, but there is one little thing that you need to know that is a bit different between the two. So you have your headings, actual, flexible, and applied. Same headings. All right, and then you draw the lines. Now let's get started. So again, your actual is going to be given to you. It's right over here, 24,920. That is given to you, 24,920. You're flexible, again, flexible in, okay, so when it comes to fixed overhead, you're not really following the same formula for variable overhead rate, and there's a good reason for that. So if you refer back to my chapter 10 videos, I discuss why your fixed cost doesn't change. So fixed cost is called fixed for a reason. It does not change with the level of activity. It is fixed, right? So if you decide at the start of the year that your fixed costs are going to be 24,000 per month, that is going to stay fixed. You do not care if you produce 1,000 units or 2,000 units or whatever. As long as you are within the relevant range that your fixed costs stay 24,000, you don't really care how many products you produce. So flexible is it's called flexible because it changes with the level of activity. Since fixed costs are fixed, they do not change. So 24,000 is going to stay 24,000 between the two. All right, I hope that made sense, because it's a little difficult to grasp this concept, because you might think, why are we doing it here and not over here? But I did explain the best way that I could. So yeah, then moving on to applied, we're gonna use we're essentially going to be using this formula, because applied is not the same as flexible. So again, let me explain. So it's up to you to apply whatever, right? So flexible is fixed because this is the truth. This, like, 24,000 is not going to change with the level of activity, but whatever rate that you find for your fixed overhead rate, that has to be applied. Applied is called applied for a reason. You apply it to a certain number of units, right? So you have to be consistent with that policy. You have to apply the fixed overhead rate to your actual level of activity. So you do follow this formula over here. So it's going to be your fixed overhead rate times your times your actual cost driver times your actual unit. So again, since you don't have a cost driver in this case, first off, you want to find your standard fixed overhead rate. So you want to find your standard fixed overhead rate and then multiply it by your actual units. Okay, so your standard fixed overhead rate, how are you going to find that? So you have your total fixed overhead given to you, 24,000 per month, and this fixed overhead is based on 1,000 packages per month. So basically what I'm going to do is to find my standards. Since both of these figures are standard, right, I'm simply going to divide 24,000 by 8,000. That gives me my standard rate of 24 bucks multiplied by my actual number of units, which is 2,400 packages. So 24 times 2,400, that gives me 57,600. Okay then. So again, we're gonna do the same procedure that we did for variable overhead variance. So this is my spending variance, and I don't really need to calculate. I can look and I can see that it comes out to 920, but is it favorable or unfavorable? Well, my actual was 24,920, so 920 greater than what I thought it would be, so 920 unfavorable, right? Did I do the favorable, unfavorable? Oh yeah, we had a 0, so all right. Okay, and then the same thing, this is called my efficiency variance, and this comes out to like 57,600 minus 24,000. That comes out to 33,600 bucks. Favorable or unfavorable? Ask yourself the same question whenever you're comparing. So that is, since you applied more than what your budgeted fixed costs were going to be. So this is what you thought your fixed costs were going to be, but you applied more fixed costs than you really had to, than you really needed to. So this can be adjusted back to 24,000. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's a good thing because you applied more, right? But that can always be fixed. If you had applied less and your budgeted had been greater, then that would be bad, because then you would have to actually readjust for greater costs. All right, I know this is a very complicated chapter and a lot of terminology going on here, so I'd encourage you to do as many questions as you can and be like very proficient with the terminology and very proficient with the calculations that go on here. Alright guys, so that's it from my side. I've done and completed the question. If you have any other questions, concerns, comments, like anything, or you need extra help, you can always email us at inquiries@geeked@gmail.com. I thank you for joining me, and I hope that you have a wonderful and productive week. Stay tuned, guys.